Welcome, all of you. I'm glad to see you here. It's a wonderful evening for us to have this conversation. I want everyone just to sort of take a breath. I know you went to a lot of trauma to get here, if you drove into LA. So just take a minute and take a breath to get that brain regulated a little bit. And then I'll start by introducing our panelists. So, first of all, I have Jerry Teo, who's to my immediate left. Then I have Juan Gomez, who's next to him. And I have Kanwapa Dahaliwa. Oh, I dreaded that I was just going to mess her name up so bad, so she's very gracious. And then we have Dr. Richard Molika. East Coast. But he's on the West Coast, all right? Yes, just keeping it real. Okay. All right, so we're going to start off with an opening sanctification that Jerry Teo is going to do for us. And you got it, Jerry?
So you start out claiming over here on the East Coast. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for showing up. Really appreciate you making the time to be present tonight. All you come with you and your ancestors and everyone. You bring your spirits with you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for being here. A lot of people here. Kind of reminds me of Sunday morning at my house. My familia would just show up and say, well, yeah, I remember that. They smelled the food and they just came. But really honored, that I can be up here and be able to share. But what I remember is that as a little boy, grew up in familias from Aguascalientes and Chihuahua, came through Texas. We grew up in Compton and Watts, and real blessed in that neighborhood that they consider high risk and all those things. We have my grandmother living with us, and every morning before she did anything, before she drank her coffee, before she did anything, she would go to a little cubby, a little hole right there in the wall that we had, and in that little cubby there, she'd have her little like that. The little saints there, with the velas. Before she did anything, she greeted the day, asked for permission, give thanks for another day. And then this walk, and I've been privileged to have, sad, with a lot of people, a lot of different ways, a lot of different routes. And one thing that all people do is when they begin something, they do it in a good way. They do it asking permission. They do it honoring all the relatives. And they welcome everybody. Because the first teaching in life is that you're wanted, that you're a blessing. And after my grandma would do that prayer, she'd come to the room and give us a bendición. I used to hate it at 5:30 in the morning. Didn't realize she was inoculating me and preparing me for many times when I didn't feel like a blessing. So with that in mind, I just want to begin, and we use this drum, use this drum. All people of all ways have a drum. You have a drum inside you too. So I'm going to ask you to connect to that drum inside you right now. Let's take a deep breath. Let it go. Just arrive here, just get here. Some of you came on the freeway, some of you came in Frega trying to get through traffic, some of you had a big line, and some of you still thinking about, you have time to eat or whatever. just arrive here right now. And we say this, and I say this in honor of all people of all ways, but I'll share it the way that I've learned, my ways. And hoping that I don't offend anyone. We begin by saying what the only Creator, Mother, Father, we thank you for this another day of life, another day of breath. We thank you. Bring together all the people of all roots of all ways. But Creator, we stand today asking permission of the indigenous people of this land, asking them for permission to be here. Thank them for all their sacred prayers and all their sacred blessings and for the sacrifices that they made. We thank you for the people whose lineage carries the Spirit here, and ask their permission to be here and to be in a good way tonight. Creator, we begin by reaching to the direction of the north, that direction where our ancestors come from. We ask our ancestors to join us, people of all ways, of all races, of all roots, those people that came before, those that sacrificed, that suffered, that struggled, that prayed so that we wouldn't be preyed on, that did all that sacrifice and the wounds that they carried so that we could even be together in a place like this. Because there's a time that we couldn't gather together like this. We ask the ancestors permission and say that we will try to do it, to honor you in the best way we can. Nanatas, abuelitos, abuelitas, grandfathers, grandmothers. We thank those elders, the ones with the enlightened hair, under the Grecian formula in the Claron. The ones with the long lines of wisdom on their hands and face, not because they're old, because they've walked many roads like those lines. The ones with the spots that are coming up, and I understood blessings from the Creator to thank them for all the sacrifice they made, for all the prayers that they've done, just so that we could heal and be here together. We say thank you for all the elders that continue to guide us that way. We turn to the direction of the West, the direction where the women are the guardian, the direction of the West, where we pray to all the mothers, the grandmothers, our sisters, sister friends, our daughters, our partners, our companions, that female spirit. Because the women really are the first teachers, the first leaders. They carry us, Creator, inside. They give us their breath, they give us their rhythm, they give us their blood. We thank you to all the women nation, Creator, because they are the first leaders, the first sacrifices. We pray that the women will feel honored, feel their dignity, that we can follow them, because at every movement, the women have always been the inspiration. They've always been that sacred connection. And for all the women that are hurting, that are struggling, that are in pain, we ask for prayers that you can for them tonight, Creator. Say that good way. We turn to the direction of the men, that direction where the men are the guardians. We pray for our fathers, our brothers, our uncles, our tios, our homies, our partners, our sons, for all those grandfathers and fathers that work hard, that do good things, that lead in a good way, that are honorable men, that they will continue to guide and step up in a good way, Creator, in an honorable way. And we pray for all those men that are locked up, drugged up, messed up, just trying to step up. They may find healing, they may find their woundedness into healingness, Creator. We thank you in that direction for all the men. And in that fourth sacred direction, that direction of the South, we lift up the children. We lift up the little ones, the toddlers, the babies, those that are just a dream still, those that are on their way. We pray for those little ones that say the truth, that ask the truthful questions. We pray and lift up our young ones that are on the bridge, our teenagers, our youth, that speak the truth, that spit the truth, that live the truth, that flow the truth, that dress their own way, that ask those hard questions because they're living a hard life, Creator, that we will be open enough and present enough to embrace them and love them just the way they are. To let them know they're sacred any way they come. However they come with their wounds and all, we will embrace them and not criticize them and not judge them and not categorize them and not drug them up, but we'll love them, our Creator. Because we do them for them, we do all of this for them and for the next 7 generations that come. We thank Grandfather's Son, Madre Tierra, Mano Viento, Mana Agua, Nana Luna, all the elements, the two ladies, the creepy crawlers, those that fly, all those elements that we say in Cloque Nawake, everything is sacred in that way. We thank you and ask for permission. Please guide us tonight so that we can move towards our own healing. All people, all ways. We say that in a sacred way of hope, that can say amen, ashe, it is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to be very, very brief and just sort of point you to a handout that you have that sort of looks at what is trauma and what is trauma-informed care, just so that we're all kind of like on the same pages. So you have a handout that you received that sort of defines some ways of understanding trauma. And then what I'm going to talk a little bit about what trauma-informed care means. If you look at your handout, basically we're talking about a framework in which service providers, communities, etc., we would like to see people start to adopt an approach that takes into account how we work with people who have suffered individual trauma, collective trauma, intergenerational trauma. So all of those things make up what we're talking about in terms of trauma-informed care. And what you're going to have an opportunity to listen to tonight is to take us beyond just trauma. It's to take us into healing. And so it's not enough just to be free of trauma. What we want to do is have people be whole. We want people to experience healing. And so what you're going to have tonight is you're going to listen to some stories and some practices that are culture-bound, culture-related, however you want to use that term, that's going to help us get from trauma to healing. You will also receive some cards so that you can write questions down, and we will ask for those around 8:20 to 8:25 so that the panel can answer your questions. With that being said, I want to start off by having Jerry and Juan start with their presentation.
You know, I want to begin by just personally, you know, my relatives, como malos calientes in Chihuahua, and you know, I don't know. I really don't know what my ancestors did, how hard they prayed, what sacrifices they made to allow me to be so fortunate, to allow me to be able to sit here, to be able to embrace teachings that I didn't know were teachings. I didn't know that blessing that my grandma would give me would save my life. I didn't know that when she said que tú eres una bendición, mijo, that you're a blessing, that I was very fortunate to hear that, because I worked many, many years with children, with adults, with men and women that we wish somebody would tell them that. Didn't realize that even when we would fall, you know, and I grew up in Compton, in black and brown neighborhood, and so I didn't realize that, you know, when I walked in that neighborhood and I would fall, somebody would come out. They didn't need a referral. We didn't need a funding source. We didn't need a treatment plan. Somebody would just come out. And they would pick me up and they would sana, culita, rana, si no sana, no sana. I mean, and people say, well, that's just a baby thing. No. I didn't understand that was medicine way. That was a song, that was a chant, that was a mantra. That sana, heal, colita rana, frog's butt, you know. I thought, this is to make it rhyme, but no, I didn't understand till I understood the indigenous ways of my ancestors. That everything is sacred, even the animals teach you, and that frog, right, is an animal of transition that moves from the water to the land, and when you're wounded, what woundedness is, what trauma is, what susto is you get stuck. The frog se mueva, you know, it moves from there, but the frog's butt, before it moves, be like the frog's butt, which is sit down on Mother Earth and Mother Tierra to understand the teaching first. Because if you move without understanding the teaching, you'll be there again. But the last part, si no sanas hoy, sanarás mañana. If you don't heal today, you'll heal tomorrow. Oh. And so these blessings and the hierbas and all the things that we were sometimes made to drink. And if it wasn't work, then you got a lavativa and it had to come out, right? Because you had some toxicity in you. But we were only talking about physically, because what we understand now is that susto. When we got susto, we got this fright that my grandma would come and hug us, and then she'd give us sugar water. She had some ancestral wisdom and understood that when you're in trauma, it affects your whole body physiologically. It changes your blood pressure, your sugar level, and everything. It's not coincidental that we have high rates of diabetes today. Problem with obesity. A lot of us have a lot of gastrointestinal problems. We have a lot of different physiological things from generations of pain and woundedness. So what we have been privileged to do, and I want to acknowledge my elders, and those people that taught me and embraced me, and there's a lot of wonderful teachers and elders in this room that I couldn't mention them all, but we've been privileged to take those teachings of the ancestors. Because my grandma would say, que Dios te bendiga, but Miss Mosley down the street, she would say, bless your child. And it's the same kind of medicine. Different language, different way, but the same kind of medicine. And what we know healing is when you bring the medicine. We call the term la cultura cura, which means within the essence of every person, of every family, of every culture, the medicine is there. Nobody else has to bring it to us. We have it internally. We have the blessings and the healing medicine in you, in your hand. When she would put her hand and rub me like this, middle of the hand is connected to the heart. Unconditional love can heal a lot. So we've been able, throughout these years, to bring the reminder of you are medicine, that you're sacred, that you're a blessing to many communities. And we want to show a video here of one community in which we've been able to do some work there in Salinas. And just talk about how you bring this medicine to communities if you can really honor the traditional ways there.
There are people that have lived here for generations that love Alisal, that love the Salinas area, and have tremendous gifts.
You see this richness of cultures, these communities of color that served as a cheap labor force for the agricultural industry.
For me, Salinas is a place of opportunity, of hopes and dreams. It's a place where you come, and you know that the struggle is going to lead you to something great.
There's a tremendous amount of wisdom here, energy, that sense of perseverance, of just wanting to move ahead.
It's a young community. It's where children live, work, and play. But that right now, even our kids are fighting, and we're losing a lot of them. We have a youth violence epidemic here.
This gang issue, this violence issue for Salinas, in many respects, has become the 500-pound gorilla in the room. It has really become deeply ingrained in the community.
Anytime you see inequity, you see these seeds that can breed violence.
There were a series of historical decisions that have created a legacy in our communities of disadvantage.
Many of these systemic and environmental situations that these communities are plagued by generationally are man-made. It's a legacy of oppression that's passed on from generation to generation.
Essentially, there's this constant barrage of messages that tell people that they're not valuable. You just look around and you see abandoned lots, you see crime, you see police operating almost like an occupying army.
For a lot of these young men, they don't get attention at home. A lot of these young men live with 15, 10 people in their home.
There's a single parent in the house. There's no person they could look up to. So they often look up to a person on the streets.
And that's the easy catch, right? The gangs will accept him whatever he is, and they'll let them hang out, they'll give them a place to stay, they'll give them food, shelter, clothing, respect. They'll give them everything they're looking for that they can't find in their home. We can lock up your kids, you know, we can take them away, we can put them in another state, but when you come back home, you're faced with the same situation, and if that hasn't changed, it's not going to work.
It's not about kids unable to make the right choice. They are making choices that are governed by their environments.
And if we just focus on the young people and the families as if they're abnormal somehow, rather than recognize that they're essentially normal people living in an abnormal environment, then we do disservice to the people.
I've committed a crime on behalf of my gang, and I was arrested. I remember when I was incarcerated, I remember sitting up, looking up at the ceiling, thinking to myself, how did I get here? How did I end up here? And through probation, I had to do community hours with one of the local organizations, and they assigned me to Second Chance. Now it was interesting because now I'm working for the same organization that I went through as a young man.
Second Chance used to focus their efforts around intervention, but they began to realize that the prevention is also very important, and that the holistic approach to the incidents of crime that we have can really make the changes.
And part of that is acknowledging the pain, the scars, and the injury, and then being able to sort of use that to bring people into a position where they can help others.
This journey that we find ourselves in, which we call La Cultura Cura, which translated means literally culture cures, but what it really means is transformational healing.
The work that's being done in Salinas and elsewhere is to really recognize that trauma, that hurt, that is really at a community-wide level, and start to embrace it, start to enter into try to bring healing into these communities.
This is kind of symbolic for what we attempt to do in communities, we attempt to do with families. We just want to kind of light it. Just look at it, just took me a second and now it's on its own, right?
Jerry's program, I think, is so beautiful because it encompasses the whole family. It gives them roots and a ground to build on. So now with probation, we try to wrap the families when the children come back home and to give them services. And I'm trying to give them Jerry's program now because it just makes so much sense and it's effective.
What did we learn here? Right?
What's happened in the last 2 generations, where we have taught in society, assimilate, acculturate, we have actually diminished the value of cultural values, cultural traditions, cultural identity.
We have other teachings, we have our grandparents, we have everything that comes from our culture, from our roots, we have it here. And we have to embrace it because somewhere down the line it got lost, or it's just something that the youth are not proud of anymore.
We have broken that spirit. Well, what we're trying to do is recreate it. We need to create alternative places. And not just with youth, we need elders there. We need older men there that can engage with them and teach them.
So why do we have open spaces right here?
Because if someone new comes.
Okay, exactly. So there was always a space for somebody, right? Great. People just want a sense of belonging, but also a sense of purpose in life. So when you don't get those first teachings, you're messed up. The main thing is we want them to understand to be a joven con palabra, to have your word is a huge, huge thing. It's not something that people are just giving, it's something that you have to earn. Nowadays you have to sign legal documents for everything, but before then, if you gave somebody your word, that was good enough.
Remember we talked about the key? What did I talk about the key?
So going through those steps of, always keeping your word. Don't do anything to hurt yourself or others.
The gourd, this is what makes the noise. And so when we pass palabra is our moment to shine, correct?
Take responsibility for your actions and be a positive role model to others. They seem simple enough, but it's not, you know, especially if you're not used to doing these things. I remember Jerry talking about this stuff. It's like, you cannot go and do this stuff unless you go through it yourself. Because if we're wounded, if we're hurting inside, how are we going to be able to heal somebody else?
I don't think straight. I'm all over the place, and you know, I got in a car wreck. I messed up a lot growing up, you know, and I went in the wrong path, you know, and I made a kind of 180 at some point when I started helping people. So there's something that happens when you help people, you also receive.
This is a representation of our union, of us coming together and being one. Because no matter what, I see what I went through growing up as a blessing in disguise, because it made me the person who I am today, and it allows me to share my story to the young girls so that they don't experience, you know, the struggles of violence, the struggles of, you know, being a teen mother, you know, and actually, you know, being able to connect with these young women.
So it starts with your mind, body, soul, your whole spirit, your family, and from then it promulgates to other avenues.
Sometimes, you know, throughout life, people have told us that we're dumb. People have told us that you mean nothing. People told us that you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too ugly, you're too this, too that. And so we begin to believe those things that other people say about us.
Quiero que mi hijo sea mejor que yo y que tenga lo que yo no tuve. Entonces yo eso lo aprendí en cara corazón. Me dieron muchos consejos, me escucharon, lloré, sonreí, platiqué y me gusta mucho lo que pasa que
we talk about our regalos and we talk about our baggage of the day or the week. Something that's been weighing us down or a gift. I was in the whole drug scene for a long time. It just took a lot of years to do a lot of, I think, work or healing. And now I think that all these years have paid off, because now I could do that. Just working on myself and working with my kids. And then teach my kids it's okay to hug me, it's okay to give me a kiss, it's okay to share your feelings, it's okay to cry. Growing up, it was the opposite. If you would cry, my dad would get mad and say, only girls cry. Or he'll put my dresses on my brother, saying you're a girl now, you know. So I was like, I'm gonna break that cycle, and I did.
My mom always told me that she'll be going to classes, but I don't know. I wouldn't ask because I wasn't really interested. After I decided to go, and then there's a lot of stuff you could learn. I would often talk back to my mom in some cases, but now I just learned to talk it through with her in a respectful way, because I have respect for women. So that way it changed me.
I just think building up their self-confidence, having more self-esteem, and also at the same time, when they're ready to have a family, they're going to raise healthy kids. They're going to raise healthy youth.
The transformation I went through is, I could only use the words of my wife. Where was this 10 years ago?
Our whole goal is recreating that extended kinship network that is built on that sense of every person is a blessing, that everyone has a sacred purpose, that there are values and traditions, and that next generation that then comes up will be the ones that guide and lead all of this.
This is not a community that's sick, in need of help. This is a community with opportunity, bringing with hope, who's organizing and mobilizing for change, and that's just that. Well, good evening. Buenas tardes, folks. I always like to say it like that, you know, so they can understand the bilingualness and the way that we were raised, especially in our cultura, that we don't forget that, because oftentimes when you don't speak Spanish and it goes, you won't be able to talk to your abuelita, your abuelo, and communicate like that. I never want to forget that, you know, especially right now, because my grandma, who lives in Oxnard, just came out of the hospital and she's really sick. You know, she got pneumonia, almost died. And I was here 2 weeks ago, and I just passed by and got the blessing on the way over here, you know, so things change, you know, so you have to appreciate. And even though that video right there really highlights Salinas, you know, La Cultura Cura is throughout the state, throughout the nation. You know, people in Coachella, people in Denver, in Sacramento, Stockton, you know, doing a lot of good stuff, you know, people in Santana. And you know, my thoughts around, you know, going beyond trauma, and the reason because of that is oftentimes really stuck in this Western way, in this really rigid way, in this medical way that doesn't allow for the natural gifts and baggage and resilience of our people to be observed. You know, when I say our people, I think about everybody, right? La Cultura Cura, you know, this concept of healing that started with Jerry and some of the elders is really, to me, at the intersection of hope and you know, really kind of champion ganas, because oftentimes, you know, we're so busy off, you know, chasing policy or making, you know, grand strategies that we forget to build up the internal will of the people, so they can come up there and they can actually, you know, have a sense of self, not a sense of you know, of must or obligación, you know, being obliged. You know, for me, I think so much around not just the legacy of trauma, but more importantly, the pre-existing history and the presence of resilience of all our peoples, and how all our peoples, regardless on how you look at it, we've all come from something bad, but something even greater before that. And what we're trying to do is really create a movement around this. So oftentimes, when we say healing, you know, it's really easy to box people in. Oh, those are the cultural people, you know, those are the curanderos and stuff like that. And it's not that, it's really sophisticated. You know, so my whole thing right now, and Jerry and a lot of us, is to really demystify this concept of healing. Because if not, we're afraid that we'll get, once again, marginalized. You know, someone else will take it. They'll brand it. They'll make it their own. They'll take it. It won't be authentic no more. You know, so those are the type of things that we're thinking about more than anything. And it's at the end of the day to establish, you know, our agency. Not because of foundations granting us, you know, oftentimes we have to challenge our funders también. This is not just about, you know, sitting up here and sounding pretty. It's challenging the status quo, you know, and it's uncomfortable, but La Cultura Cura allows us to be there, you know, and wherever we go, you know, we come with an ofrenda in a good way. You know, we like to open up the space like that. We don't know what's been happening here, so we tried our best. You know, I personally and many others like me, you know, we follow the elders, you know, the elders and experts, you know, because they got it. You know, in February 28, 26, and 27, we're going to have a big gathering of black and brown folks, people from all across the nation, to really talk about this concept. Last night in Salinas, we had some folks coming from Oakland, you know, to really do a cultural exchange. You know, so this is really powerful stuff, you know, and when you put it all together, it allows you to go forward. It's a movement, and wherever we go, it's powerful.
Thank you, thank you. Now we're gonna hear from Kawan Paul.
Hello. It's on. Okay, all right. Well, good evening. I feel really humbled and appreciative to be in this room with you all. I'm gonna just talk in the few minutes I have about this concept of listening. I'm gonna do that. It's funny, I'm talking to you and you have to listen to me, right? Life's that way. But I work for a youth organization. I work on behalf of the health and wellness and livelihoods of young people of color in Richmond, California. And I'm an adult. I'm an adult who works with young people. I have positional power. I've been a young person. And so given that, one of the key practices as an organization, as adult staff, as adults responsible for young people, is active listening. And I know that might sound like an easy term, but I was just sitting here tonight thinking, okay, don't think about what you're gonna say. You need to just listen, and it'll come up. And so it takes a lot of effort and intention and rigor. And I bring up listening because as an organization, we actually identify as an organization that leads with love. Everything we do, every program we run, every moment that we engage a young person, however nourishing or challenging, is about really holding that person in complete uncategorical or categorical love. And that is how we do everything that we do. And that's based on what we heard from young people when they organized for the space that is now Rise. What we heard from young people was, yeah, we need to do better in school. We need to, you know, work with our teachers, work with each other, this and that. But we also, and first and foremost, need space where we feel safe, where we feel like we can actually talk about and think about and actually emote about the craziness we feel in our lives without you as adults judging us, shaming us, or punishing us. And so, you know, as adults, we were like, well, you know, you need education and career services, right? Make sure you graduate. Yes, that is right. But what we also know is that unless there's love and meaningful relationship, a belief from us, a belief that they have in themselves, that their conditions can change, that they can actually heal themselves and each other, for us, it's meaningless for us to say in a grant report, oh, we've had 100% completion of our tutoring program. It's meaningless for us as an organization. And so how we define success is how young people let us know if we're loving them enough. And so our work is to actually really shift the systems, the practices, the logic models, the theories of change, the theories of action, how we do our work. For our young people, what's out there in terms of youth development outcomes, successes, doesn't line up. It might line up somewhere else, but it doesn't line up for us. And so we are committed and we are certain that we are actually going to rupture the systems and rupture them through our individual and collective healing. That is our charge. That's what we've been told we have to do. And when I talk about listening, you know, in a lot of fancy words, we say, oh, we're an organization that engages in ongoing inquiry. And we do this through these formative and summative practices. And we do, it's all important. I mean, I'm in a lot of debt to go to school to learn that, so, you know, I'm gonna use it every day, you know, wherever I can. But I also know that it's so important that we actually have language and narratives that really lift and elevate the primacy, the lived expertise of young people of color. And doing that means that we have to really change everything. It's all about relationship and how we hold young people. And then the access to tutoring, to mental health services, to gardening will all happen. And so we, as part of our learning, we've been in existence in operations as a center for 6 years. And so in this commitment to ongoing inquiry, after about 4 years, we decided, given what we were learning as an organization, now that we were actually up and running, it was time for us to actually really engage in some conversations, intentional conversations around what we were seeing as acute and chronic trauma young people were experiencing. We're first responders to it as an organization. So we engaged in a campaign called the Listening Campaign to ask young people about their experiences of trauma, violence, coping, and healing. And so in that, we did large conversations, we did focus groups, we legitimized ourselves by consulting with UC Berkeley School of Public Health, so our research design was, you know, legit. Maybe we'll get published one day. So, you know, we work the systems how we need to. But we also made sure that we wanted to make sure we were elevating the stories and the narratives of young people in the way they wanted us to. And what they've told us is it's about art and creativity and representation. So I just want to share some of the quotes and some of the pictures from the campaign. And they've all approved us doing this, so I just also want to note that. Can I go to the next one? I know that's a big one. We'll keep talking. I'm going to move it along. And I'll stop on this slide. Very keen sense of agency, ability, capacity, and choice in all of our conversations. Sometimes we think that actually might be, they have to be too mature and know too much about how to navigate their days. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Now I'd like to have Dr. Malika.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here with our distinguished guests panel. I want to thank Jennifer Chang from the California Endowment for facilitating our 3 days with the Cambodian community in Long Beach, and of course thank our wonderful Cambodian friends and colleagues that have been part of our community for the last 35 years. Our team has worked with mass violence and torture. We've treated over 12,000 survivors of torture in the United States over the past 34 years. And we all know we live in a global society. We're a global world, a multicultural world and a global world. And I want to go to the next slide here and talk a little bit about the global meaning of violence and read a little bit. I hope some of you got my manifesto and talk a little bit from the manifesto. In 2002, we met in Mount Igman in Bosnia, where the worst violence had occurred in the war between the Serbs and the Bosnian Muslims, where people were killing young children from family, friends, and neighbors off of Mount Igman. And here in this meeting here, we decided, next slide please, to meet in Rome to take up this issue of how mass violence is not only in need of mental health and health services, but also very much connected with social development, social capital, and human rights. Next slide. So you know there's over 1 billion people in the world affected by violence today, whether it's natural earthquake, violence like in Syria or around the world. And so in December 2004, we had an historic meeting where we brought 50 ministries of health together for the first time to talk about how to solve the problem of mass violence. And they came from Peru, from Vietnam, from Latin America, from all over the world. And the next slide this is a little model we came up with because all problems have to be dealt with in a multidimensional way, whether it's here in Los Angeles, Long Beach, Peru, where we worked for 10 years, or in Bosnia or Cambodia, or many of the places where we work. Next slide. And here's our H5 model, and this is a model that tried to really get deeper under the problem of violence, because at the core of healing violence and dealing with violence is the trauma story you heard so beautifully now. But you have to think about human rights, humiliation, self-healing, health promotion, and housing and habitat. Because habitat is we heard of people in Long Beach living in rat and cockroach infested homes for years where the city fathers decided to do nothing about this. Horrible stories. Now, on the next slide, I want to talk about the manifesto because, having done this work for 34 years, we talk to Jim and I and our team who are here. We see 2440 torture survivors every week. It's hard. It's a lot to deal with, from all over the world. And so I decided about 5 years ago, I said, we got to prevent violence. Maybe it's time not to be catching the barrels off of Niagara Falls. Maybe it's time to stop the barrels going over Niagara Falls. So being from an Italian immigrant family, I said, be romantic. Think of, your wildest, most grandiose, everyone in this room should be thinking the wildest, most grandiose ideas. How do we stop violence? in Los Angeles, in Long Beach, in California, in Boston, in Lynn, in Peru, all over the world, in Syria, in Iraq. How do we stop violence? So I took a crack at it. And you have my manifesto here. It begins with the beautiful poem by a Chilean torture survivor, my good friend Marjorie Augustine. You might know her. And the poem is all about empathy and deep listening. And it's in Spanish and in English. You can read it. I don't have time to read it. I have a few minutes left. So let me begin with this humble attempt, which is completely ridiculous because no one knows how to stop violence, but I'm going to take a shot at it. And I hope you do too. I'm stimulating you to take the challenge. How do we stop a violent world? How can we live in this violent world and stop people from hurting each other? Seeing reality clearly, we observe that the world is awash in a sea of physical and mental suffering due to human cruelty. While at times this vision seems too much to bear, we do not give up our dream for a more loving and peaceful humanity. This is my father's quote. He was a blind immigrant. Seeing humanity clearly means that in this new age of global communication, the pain and suffering as well as the joys of each and every person can be heard by every other human being without censorship or the control by political and social forces that in the past and present rationalize and falsifies the extent of man's cruelty to man. And this is your generation, the young people's generation. This new and original power of seeing gives us a technology of observing and changing the world comparable to that discovered by the Italian Renaissance discovery of perspective. You're in a new age. You're in a new age, you young people, and you're going to change this world. A new discovery of perspective by Brunelleschi, Alberti, Pirandello, Francesca, who moved us away from the flat to two-dimensional images of the ancient and medieval world. You're moving us away. The young people have to move us away from this two-dimensional world. We need a new perspective, a new way of seeing with a capital S. Seeing with a capital S. Seeing reality clearly, we can no longer accept the world with more than 40 nations in civil conflict and over 1 billion of our citizens, world citizens, harmed by mass violence. Torture is still widely accepted and is at epidemic proportions. Domestic violence, child abuse, and culturally sanctioned violence today towards women, children, and persons of different gender and racial orientation is a plague on our planet. When you work in the field, as long as I have, working with torture survivors, in Peru and the United States, you realize domestic violence is a plague on our planet. It's the plague. Domestic violence, gender-based violence. It's our plague. The trafficking and sexploitation of women and small children, including infants and preschool-age kids, are becoming a thriving multi-billion-dollar industry. The commercial exploitation of youth and child labor and the economic oppression of the poor remains a financial pillar of many societies. The planet itself, which gave birth to all life forms, is selfishly being destroyed. We all know this. Now I'm just going to my time is up. I just want to read this one last quote, because you can read the manifesto and see what you think. Unafraid, we declare that uncontrolled human aggression and greed is a cancer upon our world body that must be cured. As medical practitioners, we affirm that modern medicine not only has the right, but the moral obligation to address human cruelty and violence as the leading cause of illness and death. The shocking silence in our medical school, health, and public health institutions and among our healing community is so loud it's deafening. And just one last comment. Unafraid, we affirm as healers, and many in this room are healers, the elders, the spiritual healers, we affirm as healers of every type, community elders, religious and spiritual healers, traditional healers, shamans, holistic medical practitioners, medical and mental health practitioners, counselors, teachers, artists, and all the human-oriented professions, that we can make a difference and reduce the pain and suffering from human cruelty. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Malika. So As I've listened, we've talked about violence, and one of the things that we need to understand is how we define that, because it's multi-layered. It's important that we not just focus on the man with the gun in the street, but that we focus on policies and practices that also can cause trauma in folks. So thank you for bringing that up. So I'm going to ask the panel some questions here. And my first question is, how do you each define healing? What does it mean for each of you in the work that you do?
You know, I would ask my mom, pues, ¿cómo estás, mom? And many times when she was in a good place, is bien contento, mijo. And means content, right? But what my mom meant by that, as I understood, is, you know, that the blessings balance out the problems. That there's a balance. Right? In my indigenous culture, in the Nahuatl language, there's a term called Incloquenahuaque. Incloquenahuaque means interconnected sacredness. When you're at a place where you feel sacred, where you feel whole, where you feel, and that's not just a mystical term. When you walk in a place and somebody greets you and acknowledges you and sees you and embraces you, you feel whole. When you walk in a room and you can feel they don't want you there, you feel broken. And so violence and trauma does not have to be this large thing that the universe describes. It could be someone dismissing you, someone not seeing you, someone not counting you, somebody not wanting you. But the sense of healing and wholeness, which many of our rappers, our artists, our muralists, our the storytellers, many times can paint, can make us feel, make us sense, make us smell a sense of wholeness again. That is healing, when you can move to a sense of wholeness. Mother Teresa said, you want to heal peace in this world? Go home and love your family.
Thank you.
I like to think about the concept of post-traumatic growth, you know, and healing really means to challenge the dominant narrative that's out there and to really take back your health across your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health and ignite social consciousness and action. I think that's what this is really about. This is about poder. This is about the ability to do as a people. And I think about so much the long march across the institution, right? Not just the institution in our communities, these types of institutions. Because a lot of people come up all the way up the ranks, and then when they're at the top, they're lost, they're confused, oftentimes they're sleeping with the enemy, you know, and we understand the politics, but this gives you a place of balance, of being grounded, you know, and being authentic, and never forgetting that wherever you're at, you should consider yourself a community activist, you know. That's what I think.
Thank you so much. I want to give a medical view on this. I'm not wearing my sneakers, so clearly I'm not identifying myself as a community activist, because I was in Long Beach, all the community activists were wearing sneakers. And you can see, I can see a lot here. So in our medical world, we consider healing, this is a definition we use in Boston, two people in a shared empathic partnership in a community, working together to create a new worldview. That's our definition of healing. And I know that there are many other aspects of this. Of course, we also believe that there's no healing without beauty. We're absolutely sure about this. There's no healing without beauty. And I'll stop at that.
Thank you.
What comes up for me, I mean, what I'll say is, what I understand, what I experience in my own healing and recovery, and what I see every day and what I hear is that healing is so personal. and so collective at the same time. And we have to hold space and make space and be in space for all of that.
Thank you, thank you. And so as we look at healing, we also look at practices that help us to heal. And a very important practice is storytelling, having someone witness what you've been through. To acknowledge what you've been through is a very fundamental part of healing from trauma. Many of the folks that I have worked with who are trauma survivors start with nobody listened to me, nobody believed me, and so that compounds their stuckness in the trauma. So how do you see the act of storytelling functioning as part of the healing process?
Okay.
We got a system.
Anybody on the
I guess
panel?
we got a flow here. And this is you know, Círculo Flow is cool. My granddaughter Amara, when she was about 4 months of age, my daughter brought her to the house, and I saw her coo for the first time. And she looked at me and whoo, she did something to me. And so she's talking to me, right? But I saw her do that for the first time, and for some reason it touched me very deeply. That she was looking at me and I heard her voice. And I asked my daughter, I said, let me have her. Dámela. And I took her in my arms and I took her before the altar and the Virgen there, and I lit a candle. And I said, Mika, I want to promise to you. Tata wants to promise to you that you will always have your voice. That wherever you're at, whatever you do, whatever you go through in your life, that with your Tata, you always have your voice, Mika. I will always listen to you. I will try not to judge you. I will try not to push back or try and understand. I will just, you will have your voice, Mika. And that opening, that spiritual opening, that beginning of the ocean flowing, the wind that comes through, the sense of spirit that is generational, because my granddaughter is connected to her mother that's connected to grandma's way, way back. And when you stop her voice, you're stopping the great, great, great grandma's voices. So when she is allowed to tell her story, it allows the wisdom and the medicine and the blessings of the grandmas to come through. We all are a story. But what we don't understand is that you are my story, I am your story. And in our Mayan language, we say en la quech, tú eres mi otro yo, you are my other me. And when we can connect our stories and have connected voice, then we have community healing.
Thank you. Juan.
I think about that old school saying, platicando se arregla la gente, which essentially translates into, by talking, everything works itself out. Oftentimes, I think that when we find our voice, the cuentos and the dichos, the story and the sayings inoculate us with something that moves us past the trauma. So it dislodges hurt in different places and allows for movement. And I think one of the biggest things you can do is be able to speak, because when you're able to speak, you're able to voice. When you're able to voice, you're able to challenge a system and actually go beyond services and to advocacy. And I think that's very powerful.
Thank you.
I think storytelling for the communities that I'm a part of and that I work on behalf of, the communities I serve, storytelling is about humanizing and rehumanizing. Trauma it impacts everybody. I think that's so important to note, that it's not just it's not poor black and brown people that are just, we're the trauma bearers, but there's a burden around it. And I think what gets lost in the dominant narrative around trauma, around toxicity, around stress, is that the traumatizing impact of racism, of sexism, of homophobia, of transphobia, the dehumanizing aspects of that are embodied in us in ways that no evidence-based practice or study has shown or has been invested in. And That we have to do that. Because, and I say this, the white folks who live on the other part of the county in their gated communities are experiencing trauma, no doubt. The validation and the support and the resources around their experiences are really different. And that's what we have to actually elevate, that differentiated response. And we do that through ensuring that the narratives and what young people want to express is given primacy, no matter how uncomfortable it makes us. And we need to be uncomfortable.
Thank you. Like I showed in our model, the H5 model, the traumatic, the trauma story, we've been talking about this since '88. The trauma story is fundamental to all medical care. It's the basis of medical care. We begin, but it's mostly neglected. You know, very few people listen to it. But I want to say something else related to what our colleagues are saying here, is that I'm absolutely convinced that the basis of human civilization, if I can be so bold again to say such crazy things, is based on conversation with a capital C, conversation. Everybody in this room here loves conversation. I'm from an Italian background. We love to talk. And we'll talk all day long. And so do so many people, cultures in this room here. The Cambodian people seem very shy. No, that's not true. Once you get them going, you know, we did oral history project. We thought it would take an hour. It took 14 hours with one question. We said, oh, by the way, what happened to you? 14 hours later, we finally were finished. You know, and these were people from all different backgrounds, a princess, people from a farming region, uneducated people. Conversation is a wonderful, beautiful thing. And we love conversation, like with the kids. Kids love to talk, they love to be listened to. You know, our younger generations love conversation. And so we privilege conversation in medicine. We privilege it as a foundation of healing. So and deep listening, of course. You know, the beauty, like she is an expert in deep listening, she talks about, you know, the beauty of deep listening is the more you listen, the deeper you listen, the more you disappear and the other person becomes bigger and bigger. You understand what I'm saying? So you listen deeply, you shrink. You listen deeply, you shrink more. You listen deeply, you shrink even more. And all of a sudden, the kid is huge and feels great that someone is listening to them. This is the beauty of deep listening. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So as we talking about sort of listening and storytelling on an individual level, we also have to look at its impact in our communities in terms of healing. And many of, or a lot of the people who are trauma survivors come from communities that need to have their stories told as well. And so you have both this individual storytelling, but you also have storytelling that builds communities. So my question for the panel is, how do you see storytelling at a community level impacting community healing as well as individual healing?
Well, let me just, I just want to apologize to the audience because I'd like to stop and get us in círculos and all sit in a circle and just have us talk. You know, so I really want to apologize to you for us being here and you being there, because this is almost the antithesis of what we're talking about.
Yes.
We're talking about something and doing the opposite, okay? So I want to apologize to you. I feel uncomfortable doing it this way because I don't live this way, you know, and so I just want to say that much. Y también quiero disculparme de las personas que hablan español, que no estamos hablando en español. I mean, you know, so community is about, first of all, allowing community, doing it the way community does it. We can't do it the way we do it, you know. I mean, I see community doing it all the time. And you go to a school, and it baffles me, you know. They can't get parents to show up, but you see all the comadres standing on the corner ahí with their strollers talking to each other, you know. I mean, they're doing their own healing, their own, I mean, And I'm saying, why don't you create a space where they can come in, give them a little bit of cabeza? I mean, you know, communities do this. You see homies on the corner, they're like this, you know, and they're standing, they're doing a circle, they're standing like that. You know, they may be passing something around, but you know, what up, you know? Well, you know, when you got anxiety and you got no insurance and nobody's helping you with that, you're gonna do what you got to do. You know, I mean, and so how do we create environments where we don't judge even the youngster that's smoking a blunt, to be real, and allow him to tell his story, because sometimes he needs that to reduce his anxiety, so he has enough trust, and he's checking you to see, hey man, when I do this, are you going to check me? You're going to judge me? How are you going to look at me? Or are you just going to let me flow? And can create spaces with people that have different wounds, some of them generational wounds, some that will front you up and come at you hard. How do you embrace them? How do you embrace those that even in their circle don't say anything with words, but they're sharing a lot of medicine with their spirit? How do we create that? We must do it the way the community guides us to do it, and be there and feel there. And I think, you know, that you know, we have now recovered, uncovered, discovered those ways again. We are now trying to reintegrate those. The problem is, as you say, you know, when you got to jump through these evidence-based hoops and let's, you know, now categorize them and you know, do all that stuff. I mean, how do you compile spirit? You know? Well, our ancestors knew how to do it, and we can do that now even. But we have to listen to community and do it the flow in the way of community if we really want to do it the authentic way.
I'd like to give a real live example of it. And over the summer, we lost 4 Latino men at the hands of officers who shot them in Salinas. And, you know, people are pissed off. People are terrorized. Once again, it's like, otra vez pasó, it happened again. And they compared us to Ferguson, you know, and they gave credit to the police. But really what happened was that even while that body was out there, we occupied a city building, and we had hundreds of people come in and sit in a circle and talk about their story, because although they were pissed off and hurt and enraged, they really needed some healing and they wanted to talk about it. You had 8 years old, you know, and these chants of no justice, no peace, and then you know the rest, right? But how story is so seductive if we're not telling the true story. Right? Because it's really easy to go to the achievement, to the gossip. So people from the Bay Area, from LA, and from Merced, they all came over there saying there's no organizing happening here, and we got to do something. I'm like, hey, you come over here with in a good way. You know, just don't come here to try to create more, you know, excitement. You know, create here some healing about peace. What's going to happen after the anger subsides? The story. What's the true story? What's the long-term vision? You know, what's real? If we get rid of the police chief, it's still there. You know, so that power was huge. You know, so I want to share that.
Thank you. What did you say?
Yeah, I wanted to. It's wrong. I wanted to put out something that we're grappling with as an organization, as a community, and again, I'm speaking sort of in my position as like an adult ally. Well, I hope I'm an ally. I'm an adult, I know. I think. But this notion of collective healing, I think, is so linked to our being in collective vulnerability. And how do we, as program providers, as case managers, as clinicians, as community members, as families, lean in and hold the vulnerability? And we're grappling with how to do that. Because when we get tight, when something happens that's a challenge or that could be a harm, we're like, we've got to contain it. When actually we know what we actually need to do is kind of open it up and feel it. We're struggling with, we're committed to being in it and being in that healthy struggle. It's worth it because it's about transformation. But as a community of like stakeholders who are committed to young people's well-being, we have to like become reflective and look back at ourselves and hold each other. And you know, it's hard. We're also very wounded and territorial, and the systems are set up to ensure that we remain compliant in that way. So it's also being really agile and assertive around we are going against the way things were designed. And you can't do that alone. You can't even do that with 2 or 3 agencies. It has to be everybody. So it's something we're looking at. A way we've done it is to convene conversations around different issues that are related to or really touch directly around violence, trauma, healing, adolescent development, neuroscience, and decision making. So just trying to start conversations and see what they elicit. Sure, we'll do evaluations, but we're also just trying to get a sense of how does it feel to be in this and kind of step into something that might feel new or different. But we're really working, and we think a success is really standing with each other in collective vulnerability. That'll be on the endowments report. Yeah.
Great. I want to just tell 2 small little stories about community and partnership. Many years ago, our governor came back, he ran for president, Mike Dukakis, and he had a big financial debt, and he wanted to close down 72 clinics, and we were one of them. So our team has been together 34 years, our mixed Asian and Caucasian team. Some of them are here, and we've been together 34 years. And so we were afraid to do this. We went to the community and we said we needed help, and most of the people couldn't speak English, right? Over 800 people called the governor's office and said, IPC, yes, Indo-Chinese Psychiatric Clinic, yes. Out of the 72 programs, the hearing impaired in our program were not shut down. All other 70 programs disappeared. 2 weeks later, the governor called me up personally and said, please tell your community to stop calling up my office saying IPC, yes. That's a true story. Okay. So I, as a white guy in an Asian community, I said, wow, this is my community. Yeah, it was unbelievable, the support of the patients and the community towards our clinic. Okay. When we came out to Long Beach 4 days ago, feels like we've been here a year now, We also escaped the huge snowstorm, The love and affection in that community was so unbelievable, and I want to speak something to this. I just want to say one small last thing. So after a few years, I said, I'm not Cambodian, I'm not Vietnamese, I shouldn't be in this community. I'm Italian. And so I said, I'm only going to treat people from my mother's town, from the Amalfi Coast, who live in Boston. So I went through the phone book, I found 10 families. And I called them up. I said, do you guys need a psychiatrist? And they said in Italian, I said, okay, guys, can I continue working with you? Because I only found 10 Italians from my mother's town, and none of them want a psychiatrist. So what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of beauty here in partnership. There's a lot of beauty and a lot of love. And I think I cannot underscore, I said this to our team. Yes, I said, it's been an honor for us to be in this community 34 years. It's been an honor. Thank you.
I just want to just comment on something that, because we're talking about community healing, and I think one of the reasons why we don't have the latitude to do this is because many of the systems don't want to do their own healing. So that you have mental health or other systems, police, and in order to heal, you got to feel. Right? In order to feel, there may be some caca that comes up, and you got to deal with it and smell it, and and so we need the systems to heal. Let me mention one other thing, that there was a major riot at Castlemont High School in Oakland, black and brown. Black and brown youth fighting against each other, just targeting each other. and a lot of stuff. What are we going to do with these youth? What are we going to do with these youth? We fortunately had already begun a dialogue and a coalition between African American and Latino elders, and they wanted to come together for a meeting. And we said, before we meet, we better circle up and do our own healing. So we circled up for 3 days. We brought the medicine, we brought the drums, we brought the chants, we brought our prayers, we faced each other as brothers. As part of that, I turned to the elder, the African-American elder, and I got a Coribuster feather, which is an African bird, and I presented him as a gift. And I said, brother, I want to thank you and your people for everything that your people have done in this movement to lift up injustice, because it's helped my people. I want to thank all of your ancestors that have come before. I said, but I want to let you know that my ancestors have struggled real hard, and some of them are working in the fields today. And I said, and I want to make a commitment, you and me, that we as a people will come together, that we will make a commitment that we speak instead of I, or we as a us. And we've been on that journey now for a while. But we have to heal amongst our peoples too. We must make a collective commitment that way, which means that sometimes you gotta face your own wounds. And we, in all of our cultures, we have our own internalized oppression that we have to shed. Even in our cultures, we have cargas and regalos. We have beautiful traditions and all that, but we got some wounds that we gotta heal ourselves. So I think it takes the courage to be that way and come that way, with it as well.
Thank you, thank you. I just want to remind the audience that we need your questions, so please pass them to the people that are waving their hands to say, pass me the cards. And they will come and collect the cards. One of the things that a lot of times I get questions about is, what are some specific cultural practices of healing that we can utilize in our work and with people who are survivors of trauma? Do you have any cultural specific types of approaches that you use?
Everything I do is culturally specific.
Good answer.
I mean,
but maybe you can articulate it a little bit more for those of us that may not be so learned.
And we can, and our ancestors have, shown us that. But see, that's the interesting thing when you try and articulate something, and in a Western way, when it doesn't come from a Western way. And I'm hesitant often, many times when I speak to speak about these, because this is a society that wants to capture and grab and copy, but they don't commit to, the total spirit of it. But I'll just share with you that in my family, just that sense of embracing was a real important thing. My father would scold us before we go to our relative's house. Before you get to your aunt's house, before you run and play, you got to kiss and hug everybody, right? And what when I began to realize, after I did more research, is when anyone would go on a trip, when our warriors would go away, when there would be a battle, before they went, there would be a circle with the danza, with the music, with the copal, with all the things that would permeate you and fill you up. And before you left that circle, they would abrazo. They would give you a hug, bless you, clean you off, hold you in, integrate their energy in you, and say, represent. When you came back, the very same things came on, because they understood when you go to battle, you go to war, and sometimes living in a city is a war, you got to be cleaned off. And sometimes just greeting somebody and just blessing them up and fanning them off, whether you use sage or use whatever, or use your hands or use what, sometimes that is a traditional way. And so a lot of our people use, traditional herbs and use traditional ceremonies, chants, all of those things. as part of that tradition. But we gather in circle. Circle is real important because when you gather in circle, we're all interconnected, and that's what healing is, that interconnectedness.
I just want to expand on kind of what Jerry says, because the transcendence of the circle is really across race, class, and self-identification. And, you know, just thinking about the power of being in dialogue. I remember being here at the endowment, and we once a year, they take about 100 boys up to this camp, way the hell out there by Reno and stuff. And, you know, I wanted to do a circle, you know, and they put me kind of through the grinder saying, you know, what are the risks with that and all this, and it's too much. And I said, you know what, I'm not going to do it. I'm offering it as a service. Well, that first year, there was damn near a riot that took place, right? And they didn't know what to do. Folks were like, whoa. And right away, you know, they looked at me and they said, hey, you know, all that stuff you were talking about, that fire circle and stuff, you know, go ahead and do whatever you need to do. And for 3 straight days, we had these boys going all up in the woods, different boys across different sites, getting wood, teaching them about the concept of going out there and bringing home the bacon and the responsibility to come back and to create something beautiful in the fire. And they all sat. We sat for 3 days, up sometimes to 2, 3 in the morning. You know, you were there, right? And you seen what happened, the transformation that you know, and I think that was, you know, a big moment in a lot of this work, where all across the state, you know, and I'm thinking about the brothers saying so, you know, and the work that they're doing out there, you know, and, you know, and it's powerful. Like I said, so the circle is really meant to encourage, you know, an identity and esteem to really activate your orisha, for the lack of a better word, you know. So that's, I just want to share that.
Thank you. Which, you know, and I think as we're talking communities, and I know this word, evidence-based practice, can be the boogie-boo, we're also looking at community-defined evidence. And I think that's what we're talking about up here, is the community has a way of healing that needs to be validated. And so that leads me to my next question. I have a question from the audience about, what do funders need to know? So we got some either funders in hiding in here, or some folks connected to funders. So let's tell funders what they need to know about this healing process and how they can help fund these activities and approaches that are not your traditional evidence-based stuff, but culture-defined.
You know, evidence, knowledge is power. You know, I mean, this is pure Michel Foucault. You know, if you spend all your time studying psychopharmacology, you're going to think that's evidence-based practice. You know, the NIH has spent 0.0000001% of their budget studying spirituality. So spirituality is not evidence-based practice, because we spent 0.00001% looking at whether or not spirituality is effective. So I think one has to be very careful about this term evidence-based practice, because it's a buzzword that seems to be taking over, but it doesn't really mean anything. It means that the dominant society has decided through its knowledge and power base, this is evidence. But it could be, for instance, I'm sorry, I have to say this as an academic, you know, that this term is very dangerous to our communities, very dangerous. Because the real story for a donor is, what's the outcome? Look at the kids, look at the families, look at the torture survivors. Are they better? In what ways are they better? What are they telling you? What is the community telling you? You know, instead of giving these questionnaires that are mostly meaningless, you know, so I'm really, you have to be very careful with this term evidence-based. I don't know what you guys think, but, you know, but I think it's a very...
You don't?
But I think it's a very... I'm not against science. I've spent my whole life devoted to science, but on the other hand, you know, you have to look at how science is used, what's the purpose of science, who's using it, who's paying for it, and why. And I think that I'll leave it at that.
I think we always have to look at whose evidence is it. Thank you.
Invest in people and relationships, not programs. That's my advice.
Were you going to say?
Well, I can push
for a
it
long time.
I can push it a little bit further than that, and I'm probably gonna. I hope we don't get defunded for what I'm saying, but I'm gonna say something very, very. I mean, just truth that has come to me in doing this work and trying to, because what I'm seeing is community wants this. Community needs this. Not only community, practitioners need this. We need to heal the healers as well. But healing and feeling and connecting spiritually is a very female-based process. Evidence and logic and all that is a very male-oriented process, okay? So let's not kid ourselves that the frameworks that have been developed that are seen as valid, right, that are seen as credible, that are seen as having some type of credence, have all been defined by a certain society that in a certain framework, okay? But if you really want to talk about healing and where the healing comes from, and long-standing healing, then we recognize that you have to go inside. And to go inside, but let me just say this. Our ancestors are so brilliant that we can even do this now. We can even take what seems to be, something that you can't grasp, and now begin to articulate it in a way that we can show. We can show it by a youngster, we can show it by a grandma or grandpa, we can show it by people that are transforming and being different. We can show it by their different movement, their different reflections. We're able to show that now, and what we have to do is be given the latitude to be able to use our methodologies in order to be able to articulate in our way, in our language, in our flow that way. But the funders got to give us the room, right, to be able to explore that, to be able to put that out there, and be able to see it as valid as well. I'll stop there.
Thank you.
I think the scale and investment and healing, but towards leadership, capacity, and advocacy. Not just healing, because a lot of people, what happens, they want to heal and they just stay stuck there. That could be really redundant. But in places, I'm thinking about Salinas with Lauren and Sacramento with Christine and obviously Jenny, who invested in that healing work. It's some of the most transformational work that's out there. And there's, many people who use healing as a foundation. And if you look at their, rap sheet, it's amazing. They're changing stuff. So once again, I think that if you are a program manager in your work and your portfolio, that you should have some type of healing-esque type of metrics within your grant-making decision. Yeah, you're granting,
So here's another question. It'll probably be our last question, just being mindful of the time. What role does or can media play in the healing process, and in particular looking at the context of music?
As an organization, we, as much as I'm talking shit about programs, we have hella programs, right? We have 50-some programs. But kind of the Candy program, the one that we know most young people come into and are most interested in, is our media, art, and culture programming. So our music, our video, our graphic arts. And so we have been really intentional that that programming is really set up to engage and welcome any and all young people however they enter the space. What we've also ensured is that that programming, as well as all the programming, so not just the programs in the community health department, which I'm a part of, but that actually are healing centered. And that we actually know that the therapy and the connection and the rehumanizing and the validation of experiences happen way more and way deeper in the engineering room than they do in our group room and our case management room. And it doesn't diminish the need for tailored supports and services, counseling can be a really powerful modality. So for us, it's about how can we offer and create the multiplicity of modalities for young people, and that we actually destigmatize whatever they need to heal. Because some young people are like, I just want a therapist. Some young people actually just say that now. I just want a therapist. I don't want anything else. So we have to listen to that. We have to make sure that's available. But we also know, I'm not going to say that most of them say that, but it's also, where are the spaces? How do we meet them in those spaces, those modalities, those platforms, the tools, the technology that they use and that they actually own to support their healing? So it needs to happen where they are. And so for music, part of what we do is help support creating music that actually validates, that shares stories. We do a mixtape every year. And all of it, the art design, the production is by young people, and they have to work in collaboration. And the music has to be about enlivening our values as an organization. But that said, the process is to really storytell and share, and to actually create a meta-narrative for their communities and their hopes and their dreams and their goals that really breaks up the dominant narratives about them. And it's hard as hell. I mean, we're up against a beast, but that is a piece of how we do it. And so we want to continue to support that. But also, we know that it's not, again, just about go to Pro Tools for 9 weeks and then you're going to get, you know, a certificate. It's about how are you actually connecting with other folks throughout the program. So we know music is a really key component, but we also know the industry is so harmful, and the harmful and violent messages that it recreates. And when we think about who owns it, it's the industry isn't owned by folks who look like the young people in our community. It's not. But that's who it involves. And so there's also the violence of that we have to show, and that it actually replicates historical narratives around white supremacy, male supremacy. So all of that has to happen, and it has to feel fun.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm gonna just start. Okay.
I'd like to say something that I think we have to be careful when we're talking communications and media, because sometimes that can be pitted against healing, and we'll throw buku bucks at messaging, right? Hella money, let's get the communication, let's get the idea out, and is it innovative, rather than actually, you know, really using messaging, but, you know, agents in the community to create that. But we do have to occupy the social media space with cultural stories. Like, if you do a market analysis, and all the big corporations, what they're doing, they're taking stuff from the 70s and 80s and making it cool again. You know, so the same thing. We gotta, when we're in this work, we gotta, you know, kind of make it kind of ethnic looking. You know, not super brandy and stuff like that. You know, make it a little bit, put a little bit of swag in it, I think.
Yes, definitely the swag. Definitely the swag. So I just want to take a moment to thank all our panelists for really starting the dialogue. We're coming to the end of our time together, and I can't even believe we're near the end. It seems like we just started about 2 minutes ago. And I know that we can all go a lot deeper around these issues around culture and trauma and healing. So hopefully this just plants the seed to start our dialogues, and that you all will take this with you and continue to look at all the types of violence that is perpetrated against all different types of communities and peoples, and how that comes out in terms of trauma and generational trauma, and then how we look at healing. Yes.
I just think if we're going to start healing as a community, we need to give voice back to the community and engage in actual dialogue, because there's a lot of people here that have solutions to the problems. The reality is, whether you're a nonprofit or an institution, you guys are not connected to the youth in the community because it's not working. If we look at the prison industrial complex, it's full of our people, and we're being enslaved today. And if we really want to help, we got to start healing and going to the streets and giving back. Because my people are hungry in Central America and El Salvador, you know what I mean? Because this setup is not really giving back and really trying to be about healing. So allow us to have a voice so they can really heal. Thank you.
Thank you. And on that note, we will do a closing ceremony.
Let me just offer to all of you, we have a small center in Whittier called Sacred Circle Center. You guys can look it up online. Just invite you, if any of you who want to come and just hang out there. We have some healing circles that we do. There's a space there that we try and bring people together just for this purpose as well. So, because I didn't want to just leave the space without offering that, and I think there's some resources out there as well. But one of the things, we were just ending talking about media, and our ancestors knew that the drum, and everybody has a drum, that the drum hits a certain chakra in your body, that the flute hits a different one, that sounds of ocean hits a different one. So that the sounds that are emanated in nature really can be a very healing force. Go sit by the ocean. Go sit by Grandmother Ocean. Something beautiful happens. Listen to the wind. Some beautiful things happen that way. So what we want to do in just kind of closing is just kind of, again, just give thanks that way. And so I'm just going to ask you just to sit for a moment and think about what you're grateful for. And think about who in your life has brought that medicine and that healing to you for a moment. I also want you to sit with what the brother said out there. And he says there's a lot of people that need healing in the community that we're not reaching. Let's bring them to mind in this moment right now. Bring their spirit here. Bring that voice. Bring their pain that way so that we can come together in a good way. And then the last thing I'd like to ask you just to consider in this time is your own healing, and we can do it with a breath. With a breath, what you need to let go, and with a breath, what you want to take in. They say the grass is greener not on the other side, but where you water it. What are we going to water as we go forward tonight? So just do it this way. We thank all the ancestors and all those that have come before, and thank them for all that they've given us and the medicine that they allow us to have inside. For the women nation and all our mothers, our grandmothers, and all the females that give us the blessings and that unconditional love and the blessings of who we are, that they held us for 9 months and give us that ombligo, that little belly button to remind us of the sacrifice that unconditional love takes. For all the men, the fathers, the grandfathers, the sons, the brothers, the homies, the partners, that we call to their sacredness too, to step in the circle to help heal next generations. And today we commit for the children and 7 generations forward that we will step up, that we will stand up, that we'll speak up. We will embrace them just the way they are, love them just the way they are, bless them just the way they are. As you leave today, let me bring here the grandmother's message to all of you, that you are sacred, and you are a blessing, and you have a sacred purpose, just the way you are. We thank you. May the Creator bless you and your family and all your relations, guide you on your way home. We're so blessed to have you in all that you do
for so many people in this community and all over the world. And we share this blessing in an interconnected way with people of all ways, of all races, of all prayer ways, of all spirits. We thank you for showing up tonight again for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.